Hello, I'm Alex Mori, and welcome to Interviews Through Time. Tonight we have a very special guest, Mr. Charles Darwin. Mr. Darwin, may I say, it's fantastic to have you on the show with us. Thank you, Mr. Mori, and please call me Charles. Alright, Charles. Well, I must say, you have quite the interesting book here. Why don't you tell everyone what it's about and why you think it's important? Well, my book is called The Origin of Species, and it's all about my theory of natural selection. So, natural selection, what exactly is that? Well, natural selection is where you might pick one flower over another because you like the scent or color, and that allows that flower to be able to reproduce, and natural selection is very similar to that, only the difference is that it's the forces of nature selecting the flower instead of a person. So what exactly makes your theory different from survival of the fittest? Well, Alex, natural selection is where an organism contributes its genes to the next generation's gene pool, whereas survival of the fittest is more about outliving the other organisms in the generation. Okay, but what kind of evidence have you collected to support this theory? Because it must be quite controversial with the religious crowd. Well, to address the religious issue, if I may... yeah, sure, go ahead. This book wasn't really intended to upset those people of religious influence. It was mainly just a statement of my theory based on the observations of myself and my colleagues. And you, of course, are sure that these colleagues' observations are reliable enough to suit your theory, right? Of course, otherwise all my observation and speculation would have gone to waste. So, what kind of observations do you use in Origin of the Species? Well, I use various different examples of flora as well as bird and animal or insect examples also as well to help illustrate my point. Excellent. So, do you have anything to say about the fact that some people are saying that your book is not a classic of biology? Well, I would say that my book has revolutionized the way that people think about the origin of the species, as well as changing the course of biology for all of history. I think that would really be enough to qualify it as a classic. And on that note, how do you feel about people making accompaniments to your book, you know, to make it more modernized? I think it's fantastic that people want to make the ideas of my book open to more people, so that more people can read about my ideas. This also shows that my book is also considered a classic because of the fact that it is seen as valuable to people of today. And you just love your evidence. You know it, Alex. So, to not get too far off topic, why did you exactly feel that the public needed to know about this particular theory? Well, I felt that it was important because it allowed for the explanation of realities and certain parts of realities that other attempts at explanation will not quite as well done. You are, of course, referring to the independent creationists by your reference to the other attempts. You got it. Well, maybe I'm playing the devil's advocate, or in this case, God's advocate. But, with your anti-creationist attitude, didn't you think that this might attract some flack from the religious crowd? Well, to be honest, I didn't really worry about the church that much, so I didn't really spend much thought on it. So, when did this idea of natural selection originally occur to you? I'm so glad you asked, Alex. You see, because the actual story is quite different than the release story that I put out. You see, I was actually sitting on the beach in one of the Galapagos Islands, drink in hand, with a little umbrella in it, right? Oh, of course. Anyways, I was sitting there, and I was staring at the birds, and I noticed that there was two different kind of groups of birds with different beaks and such, and I wondered, what made these birds different? Was it that they were all independently created that way, or were they derived from one single parent species? Well, that was certainly different than what I expected, but it looks like you still had the real heart of a scientist, even though you were on vacation. Indeed. So, tell me, what age group did you originally intend this book for? Well, the main audience of the book was my colleagues and fellow naturalists, but it was written so that the non-scientist could understand the concepts that was contained within it. So would you say that this book was not intended for younger audience and more meant for the middle-aged crowds? I don't think I would put it that way, because If a younger person were able to read my book and to understand the concepts that were contained within, good for him. Then that's another person that could put forward their opinion on my theory. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that you're saying that your book should be available to the general public as a whole. Exactly, because what is the point of writing a book for non-scientists if the only person that's going to read it is going to be my fellow naturalists? Therefore, I mean, I could just write it in the language that our fellow naturalists can understand and not the common man. But this book is written for the common man, therefore he should read it. I've noticed that you've had a lot of emphasis on men. Have you not heard of the women's right movement at all? Oh, that's just a passing phase. Not really. It's actually been legalized. Really? Yeah. Oh, my mistake. What I meant to say was the origin of species is meant for the common man or woman, and that it was meant to be read by him or her. It still feels kind of awkward. Huh, who'd have thought? Women's rights actually being legalized. Anyways, moving on. So Charles, we all know about your trip to the Galapagos on the Beagle, but is there anything else that in your various trips and travels and experiments that you found to be really interesting that you'd like to tell us about? I'm so glad you asked! One of my favorite subjects to research was the world of worms. I know what you're thinking. Don't worry, I'm sure it'll be terribly interesting. Now, back in my day, the worms were not seen as being terribly useful. In fact, they were seen as being quite the nuisance. But I had a theory that worms actually were useful to the ecological system. So I did a few experiments and found out that worms actually helped to till the soil and to spread nutrients throughout it. Interesting. Well, it looks like we're almost out of time, so the origin of species has certainly been enlightening. We're just here interviewing Mr. Charles Darwin about Origin of the Species. Charles, it has been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you, Alex. It's been spectacular being here with you, and I just want to say that I look forward to finding out what you've learned from reading my book. Well, this is Alex Moore saying, that's the way. I like it. Good night. Good night.